I grew up in Southern California, and I remember I loved going to the beach. I love being out in the sun and running around and just being a kid. And of course, due to the situation that's at hand, a lot of people have been breaking the so called protocols and going to the beaches, at least locally where I am in Southern California. And the idea that the sun itself would pretty much burn off any kind of virus or any kind of flu just seems to make sense logically and seems to suggest that it's true scientifically. The Philadelphia Inquirer here says, do salt water and sunshine at the shore kill the coronavirus? Here's what science says. And according to the article, the coronavirus infections appear to spread far more easily in closed indoor environments than outdoors. The Philadelphia Inquirer just straight up says it's more easily spread in indoor environments when we have everybody locked in their homes. Of course, that's slowly changing now. People are waking up to the fact that a lot of this was government overreach. And down here it says the White House recently touted lab studies done by the Homeland Security Department that found increases in temperature, humidity, and ultraviolet light responsible for summer tans can accelerate the natural decay of virus particles on various surfaces. At a news briefing, a top Homeland Security official said, quote, the virus in droplets of saliva survives best in indoor and dry conditions. The virus dies quickest in the presence of direct sunlight. Of course, other experts say sultry summer weather may reduce coronavirus activity, but not by much, because they have to continue to toe the line of fear mongering and making the public afraid about what this whole situation entails. This particular article in the conclusion section here says, one thing is clear, many studies have found that spending time communing with nature has physical and mental benefits. That's why some experts, including Harvard University's Mark Lipsitch, have argued in favor of keeping parks and beaches open. So it's interesting how even in the world of academia and science, there's no consensus here. Some people are saying, hey, yeah, go outside, get in the sun, it helps the whole situation. And others saying, not so much. And in the last Canary Cry Radio episode, we even reported people from Harvard and Yale suggesting that this early ending of the quarantine is going to kill millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people. It's ridiculous. But in general, sunshine is good for you, and it could help curtail any kind of infection that may be out there. But of course, this is convenient that back in 2018, it was reported that Harvard scientists begin experiment to block out the sun. And again, this is December 2018, so 2.5 years ago. It said a group of Harvard scientists plan to tackle climate change through geoengineering by blocking out the sun. And this experiment that they announced is called Scope X, and I'll leave links in the description so you can check it out. But basically, they admit that they want to geoengineer the skies to control the climate. Because obviously, we have to think about the future of our children in the future. We have to make sure that they're going to have an environment that they can live and survive. All that kind of stuff, all that Greta nonsense that we always hear. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the targeting of children here in the Great Hegelian Dialectic. Because as I said in the video that I made a couple days ago about Q, why Christians should ditch QAnon parts 1 and 2, the big sort of thing that I wanted people to think about, especially people that are really into Q, what is the end game for QAnon? Who replaces the deep state once it's drained? How do we know that the pedo networks go down? And if they do go down, how do we ensure that it doesn't come up again? And I asked several people that in the comments section were like, oh, you don't understand what Q is. You don't understand what you're talking about. We'll know when the president, signs an executive order ending pedophilia networks and whatnot. But my point was, what's acceptable to you? Would the white hats surveilling the entire world be acceptable to make sure that the bad guys don't come up? Or what about tracking children to ensure that the deep satanic cabal doesn't scoop them up? Make sure that they're tracked from birth so that none of the bad guys can get at them. I don't think the Q people have thought this through. And in the last Canary Cry News Talk, which I know a lot of you guys don't like Basil's googly eyes, but if you can get past that part of it, the superficial part of Basil's look and actually listen to what we're talking about, because we have been podcasting since 2012. Okay, so it's been 8 years I've been podcasting with them, but all of a sudden you guys freak out because we start live streaming some of this. Not you guys, some of you guys in the comment sections freak out because we started podcasting some of the stuff live. We talked about the politicization of the New Age movement just in time for elections this year. And it's just interesting how a lot of the New Agers are really on the Q train, and a lot of New Agers are really Trump supporters through the Q train because of the fact that they're taking down the satanic elite and the satanic cabal and all this kind of stuff, which is always interesting to me. You know, how are you against these Satanists and not have this truth of Jesus Christ as the answer? It's like, hey, they're Satanists. If they worship Satan, then the opposite might be true as well, that the true light, not this false light, but the true light is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. But I digress. Psalm 127:3 says, "Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate." And of course, we have to protect our children. It's the most important thing because it shapes where society is going. I agree with that sentiment, but what we are shaping them with is the point of contention here. And I wanted to look at HR 6666 because people have been messaging me about it. So I looked it up. And of course, I looked up the wrong HR 6666. The one I found initially was the bill from December 13th, 2012, which was introduced, and it was called the Healthy Communities Through Helping to Offer Incentives and Choices to Everyone in Society Act. Wow, that doesn't sound socialist or anything like that. But back in 2012, you know, this whole idea was to basically create a situation where we're going to fight and prevent obesity. And it's going to be part of this Everyone in Society Act. And part of what they offered here was tracking physical activities in schools and have certain amounts paid for physical activity, fitness, and exercise treated as amounts paid for medical care. So having that kind of financial infrastructure in place. And it's interesting because this bill actually talked about designing and encouraging Americans, especially children, youth, and families, to be physically active outdoors. Yeah, back in 2012, you know, people were complaining about how kids are just staying indoors and playing video games. So they were trying to get kids outside, you know, because, you know, we got to get them moving around a little bit more. But obviously, this wasn't the HR 6666 that everyone has been messaging me about. The actual one is the contact tracing bill, HR 6666. Of course, you guys know the implications of 666. Of course, this is 4 sixes. The Bible is clear that the mark of the beast and the number of his name is 3 sixes, not 4. Nevertheless, very interesting that this bill about contact tracing, tracking everybody for the coronavirus thing, is involves this number 6666, and it was presented on May 1st, 2020, Illuminati Day, May Day, and of course, the day that gold was confiscated and banned back in the 1930s. So I went through this, and of course, the act may be cited as the COVID-19 Testing, Reaching, and Contacting Everyone Trace Act. Doesn't sound dystopian at all. And some of the points made in this bill as necessary, testing individuals and providing individuals with services related to testing and quarantine at their residences. Okay, so they're just presupposing that we're all just going to continue to be in quarantine. And I found this little section interesting as well, this priority section that talked about applicants that agree in hiring individuals to carry out activities funded under this section to hire residents of the area or community where the activities will primarily occur, with higher priority among applicants described in this paragraph, given based on the percentage of individuals to be hired from such an area or community. Basically using the local people as the police officers or those who will help conduct this tracing. I keep bringing up the virtual panopticon and the scientific dictatorship that was written about by Paul and Philip Collins, about 10 years ago, I think maybe even more than that. But the virtual panopticon is a very important concept to understand because we're really seeing it now, where the citizens police one another because they're afraid of the central tower, which is able to basically take out or kill anybody who does not comply with the standards that are set before them. And so instead of the authorities enforcing the people enforce themselves and police each other. That's the ideal situation for the elite because then they don't have to necessarily deploy military action. They can let the citizens become divided amongst themselves and police each other. And of course, it brings up the hot spots and how, certain communities will be more targeted for this type of program. And I thought this was crazy. Authorization of appropriations, $100 billion for fiscal year 2020. We're already halfway through 2020 and they're just going to throw another 100 billion at this thing, and such sums as may be necessary for each of fiscal year 2021 and any subsequent fiscal year during which the emergency period continues. They know this is going to last way longer. I know we're trying to get the economy going again and everyone's going back to work, or at least trying to, but you have a lot of people that have become docile and have really enjoyed the unemployment checks because they're making more money than they are working. And I know they're trying to create provisions to prevent that and get people back to work. But overall, you wonder why we don't have this fair, system monetarily in the world. It's because we throw $100 billion at stuff like this, which is just more totalitarian, in your face surveillance. And again, a virtual panopticon, because obviously we have to make a better world for the children. We have to protect the children. And as I was doing this research, I found this other bill called S3398. Interesting, 33. And this is a bill that was published on March 5th, 2020. I know people in the realm of politics might be familiar with this one. To establish a National Commission of Online Child Sexual Exploitation Prevention and for other purposes. And basically, as far as I can tell, this is a way to target tech platforms, internet platforms, social media platforms, and trying to make sure that children are not exploited. And of course, I want to make sure children are not exploited online. It happens way too much, and I think a lot of people get away with it way too much in terms of posting video or whatever it is of things that are just illegal on one hand, but of course morally and ethically wrong as well. So again, of course I want that to be a provision, but again, at what cost here? It's very interesting how there's this give and take, this Hegelian dialectic, where you have this problem and more people are becoming aware of this problem. And so what is the reaction, a solution? Well, the reaction seems to be something like this, a bill where you start to lock down on some of these issues. Obviously, I agree with the premise of this bill, or the purpose of it. As it states here, the purpose of the commission is to develop recommended best practices that providers of interactive computer services may choose to implement to prevent, reduce, and respond to the online sexual exploitation of children, including the enticement, grooming, sex trafficking, and sexual abuse of children, and the proliferation of online child sexual abuse material. And, YouTube had a big change because of this situation as well. But I thought it was interesting that they would compose 19 members here. Just a little thing to point out. And if you go through the matters addressed, again, a lot of it agreeable, a lot of it obviously good in terms of trying to nail down the people responsible for this. But I bring this up because, it's got some tracking elements to this where, again, everybody has to be tracked if they're going to nail down the bad guys. Okay, preventing, identifying, disrupting, and reporting child sexual exploitation, coordinating with nonprofit organizations and other providers of interactive computer services to preserve, remove from view, and report child sexual exploitations, okay? But then retaining child sexual exploitation content and related user identification and location data. All right, so I don't understand because, location data and user ID, those things are so flippant. Okay, people that know what they're doing can very much avoid any kind of user identification when they get on some kind of social media platform, as well as location data. Using a VPN alone can keep people a little bit more anonymous in terms of who's behind some of the things that are being posted. So again, I don't understand how this is anything but, hey, let's just track everybody to make sure we can weed out the bad guys. And I can go through each one of these, and I'll leave links to all of this so you guys can do your own reading. But it's interesting here that relevant considerations talks about the costs and technical limitations of such an idea here, and the impact on competition, product and service quality, data security, and privacy. Yeah, big issue. That's a huge issue, a huge consideration that can prevent this. The impact on ability of law enforcement agencies to investigate and prosecute child sexual exploitation and rescue victims, and the current state of technology. Yes, the current state of technology. The government is behind on technology. I mean, the United States in general is behind when it comes to technological implementations, for better or worse. In one sense, for the better, because we're just not going to accept this crazy totalitarian surveillance overlord thing. Although now, because of the whole situation we're under, a lot more people are susceptible and accepting of it, and it's a great opportunity to accelerate the technologies to implement those ideas. But again, when you look at this bill, most of it is to replace the language here. As I scroll down, let me get to it. Basically, a lot of the old bills that talk about child pornography, they're replacing child pornography with the word child sexual abuse material. And that's literally the second half of the document, is all these amendments of every single time the word child pornography is used, they're just going to replace it with child sexual abuse material. I'm kind of down with that. All right, that makes sense, because, of course, with all these bills, child pornography makes it sound like it's just an okay thing. It's just child pornography, whereas they're replacing it with an actual reality of the situation, child sexual abuse material, because that's what all of that stuff is, and that's what this bill is concerning. And so, again, yes, good, of course, we want to eliminate the bad guys. But at what cost? What's going to be the sort of Hegelian dialectic move here, where the solution to this is going to be, and that seems to be some kind of tracking of everybody. And this is something that I kept bringing up again with the Q thing, but just this is a process that is unfolding, that has been happening, and I've been warning on this channel for years, and specifically since about 2015 when the UN 2030 agenda came out. I was like, man, you guys really need to read some of this stuff, because they're looking at eradicating this whole corrupt system. And it's not something that you have to go way back to look at. I've documented Manly P. Hall talking about the Brotherhood, trying to make sure that the corruption of the political and institutions will be eradicated in the 21st century. And of course, even all the way back to Alice Bailey talking about we're going to present the world with this new world order, as opposed to the old New World Order, basically, with the totalitarian system. It's going to be the Great White Lodge Brotherhood on one hand and the Brotherhood of Darkness on the other hand, and the people must choose. And my point there was, the path is narrow. Jesus said the path is narrow, and the application of that concept is becoming more and more important as the duality here plays out right before us. But here, number 16, UN.org, the Sustainable Development Agenda. And, I found this page again, and I realized that I had highlighted this stuff a long time ago here. But the 16 goals, the targets, okay? Is end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and torture of children, promote the rule of law at the national and international levels, and ensure equal access to justice for all. By 2030, significantly reduce illicit financial and arms flow, strengthen the recovery and return of stolen assets, interesting, and combat all forms of organized crime. Develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. And I think blockchain is going to do that. Again, both good and bad. On the one hand, good. Yes, we need more transparency in all these centralized organizations. On the other hand, bad, because that means everything you do to interact with these central organizations is going to be tracked. Now, there are ways to stay sovereign away from this and use the same technologies, but I digress. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Number 16.8, broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries in the institution of global governance. Right there, guys. They want global governance. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're very clear that that's what they want. And then 16.9, this has been something I repeated over and over and over again on this channel, but it bears repeating again. By 2030, provide legal identity for all, including birth registration for all. Okay, not just people born in America, but across the world. We want to make sure that everybody is accounted for and everybody is in this system, because obviously the best way to prevent any kind of child exploitation is to have every child accounted for in this giant system. Okay. And this comes at a time. And again, I was talking about Q and the whole idea of this move. What would be the ultimate solution here? Would you accept a white hat surveillance state if it means, hey, the good guys are in charge? We can have a totalitarian system as long as the good guys are in charge. Is that what the case is? Well, ironically enough, or maybe not ironically, the story came out. We reported this on Canary Cry News Talk yesterday, but it bears repeating again. The Jerusalem Post, Benjamin Netanyahu suggests microchipping kids slammed by expert. Okay, so, I know there's a lot of Christians out there, especially the evangelical Christians, who are really like, hey, Israel is our friend. Israel is, they can do no wrong. They're our best ally in the Middle East. We got to fight those Islamic terrorists, that whole narrative. Well, there you go. Your little champion over there in Israel is suggesting, well, of course, his power is eroding or whatever. Right now, it's a little shaky. But in any case, he's suggesting microchipping all the kids. I mean, come on, this is just ridiculous. And it took a cyber expert, Einat Meron, who I guess has been critical of this type of thing for a while now. She's been speaking out against some of these issues about, certain institutions getting hacked and things like that. But I mean, seriously, Benjamin Netanyahu, really? And those evangelicals out there who are really, pro-Israel, really? Really? You guys are going to support Israel when the head guy is like, hey, let's just microchip our kids? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So it says here, quote, I spoke with our heads of technology in order to find measures Israel is good at, such as sensors. For instance, every person, every kid, I want it on kids first, would have a sensor that would sound an alarm when you get too close, like the ones on cars, the prime minister said. Oh, so we're just cars now. We're just, this is just ridiculous. And the counter here by cybersecurity expert Einat Meron, she told Ynet it will be hard to do it to more than 1 million school children who return to their educational institutions in order to ensure one student sits at the distance of 2 meters from another. It is fictitious and dangerous. And later it says here, Meron told Ynet that microchipping children will not pass any test, both practically and legally. Well, thank goodness that there's somebody out there that's against this and says that even legally that's not even possible. And this ought to infuriate you, especially if you're a Bibi supporter out there. The office added that the prime minister's suggestion is, quote, an idea that may help maintain social distancing and there will not be any violations of privacy. Okay, I mentioned this in the Canary Cry News Talk yesterday, but again, it bears mentioning again. Privacy, of course, is a concern here, but that's not the big issue here. The big issue is they want to microchip all the children in Israel. Do they not realize that? Like, hey, the issue isn't, the people's concern isn't necessarily privacy, although that is one part of it. It ought to be microchipping all the children. It's just absurd to me that this is even a thing. Ephesians 6:4 in the ESV, it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Okay, this type of program here, microchipping all the kids, those who will comply, they'll be lost. But those who don't, and those who might live, they're going to be very upset at their governments if we come out of this, in the next few years, in the next couple decades, realizing that their government tried to microchip everybody. It's just absurd. And if you go to Proverbs 22 here, some wisdom. Verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. He won't depart from the faith. And then verse 8, he who sows injustice will reap disaster, and the rod of his fury will be destroyed. The story is very troubling to me, and I don't know why it's not being shared more widespreadly with people. It's just another example of this Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. And of course, if we're going to go with the HR 6666 and all the sixes everywhere, there is this patent, the cryptocurrency system using body activity data. And I bring this up in the context of children because that kids are going to be hooked into this thing. And I made a video, a full deep dive into this thing back in March. But YouTube really doesn't like this video because it only has 14,000 views. And of course, there's over 260,000 subscribers on this channel. And I know not all of you guys get notifications when I publish a video. I know you guys sometimes get unsubscribed without unsubscribing. all these algorithm changes and stuff they're doing in the background, they're making it difficult for information like this to get out there, which is why I really appreciate everybody who's on Patreon supporting the Face Like the Sun channel, or if you support through other platforms that I publish or am a part of, Canary Cry News Talk, Canary Cry Radio. It does help because there's no way that this information gets out without you guys. I'm not going to rely on algorithms to get this information out. It's really up to you guys to share it with friends and family, to talk about these issues and to raise awareness of these issues. Because I think it's important, not just because the reality of the situation, but because the message on this channel has always been Jesus Christ is Lord. That's been the message. And of course, I have my own eschatology and my own views of how things might play out and how things that are unfolding today sound eerily like all the prophetic passages that are written in the Bible. But you don't have to agree with me on that point. But you can agree with me in the point of, hey, Jesus Christ is the solution. He is the truth that will set you free, not any kind of bill, not any kind of legislation, not a politician, not some kind of uprising or rebellion. Those things are not going to solve the fundamental problem here. Even the whole child trafficking thing, you can have an executive order that says, hey, we're going to end this and we're going to take whatever measures technologically or otherwise to end this whole corruption. That's not going to be it either, because all it's doing is politicizing the people to vote one way or another. And that's all that the governments really care about when it comes to power and the financial infrastructure, all of it. So I'm going to end the video here, and I didn't get too deep into anything, but I wanted to point out this thing with children, because obviously I have little kids, and with Elon Musk naming his kid X Ash Archangel with his occult musician girlfriend, who he calls partner, I think it's really important to think about what we're doing to our kids, not just in the realm of like the whole transgender movement and the gay rights and all that kind of stuff. That was just like barely a precursor to, I think, what we're going to see as time goes on, because it's just going to get way worse. And not only are kids going to accept a sort of totalitarian technocracy, but they're going to be forced to accept a type of worldview that is antithetical to the gospel message. And that's the really important point here. We're going to have to be in the world, but we don't have to be of it. And as long as we teach our children what the truth is regarding Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, you're going to be doing what you're supposed to be doing as a parent. Obviously, do the other things, feed them, shelter them, teach them life lessons, all that stuff. But when it comes to the greater social impact of the youth and the youth moving forward, it's going to be really important, because I'm guaranteeing you this, because of the huge New Age resurgence, it's never really gone away, but the New Age movement, especially the politicization of the New Age movements, you're going to have a bunch of young kids into like crazy meditation and third eye opening, and you're going to start seeing all that kind of stuff from young children, and it's going to become popular, and they're going to have celebrity kids doing all kinds of weird stuff. It's going to start happening more and more and more, and we just have to push back against it, not in the sense of demonizing the person. That's really important, because, we talk about these individuals like Elon Musk or Bill Gates, or, these individuals that are out there. Obviously, they should be denounced, and the things they say and the things they're projecting should be criticized. But you got to understand that they're human. Well, some people think that Elon Musk is no longer human. But assuming the best here, not just Elon Musk, all these individuals that are out there, they are still human. And if you go back to Age of Deceit, The Fallen Angels and the New World Order, which was published in September of 2011, and, it's just one of those films that seems to be more and more relevant as time goes on. Not because anything I did, but because what the Lord led me to do. All glory goes to him with any kind of success that film has had in waking people up to the reality of the situation here. But I say in the film that basically humanity, those who are like into Satanism, they're all victims of the principalities and powers that have controlled people. Now, some of them obviously have willingly, accepted that type of worship of the enemy. But in terms of humanity as a whole, we are in this spiritual war, and many people have fallen victim to the deception. And a lot of people are born into families or areas where that deception is tradition. And so you got to understand that humanity itself are victims of the rebel principalities and powers that are doing nothing but trying to destroy humanity on one hand, but also keep humanity from knowing the truth. Because here in Romans 3, we try to expose all this evil, but here's the reality, okay? Righteousness through faith. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been revealed as attested by the law and the prophets. And this righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Jesus Christ. We can't redeem ourselves. These are very basic principles of Christianity, but I think that it's forgotten when so much has been politicized and so much has been, hey, make sure that Trump stays in office. Of course, Trump is better than Hillary back then, and Trump's probably going to be quote unquote better than Joe Biden. Although, again, I keep saying, I think it would be very entertaining to have Joe Biden as president, just to, have him run his mouth. It would just be very entertaining. But again, I digress. My point being, Jesus Christ is Lord. God presented him as the atoning sacrifice through faith in his blood in order to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance he had passed over the sins committed beforehand. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so as to be just and to justify the one who has faith in Jesus. Thank you guys for watching. One way you can support, I just made this shirt because everyone was calling me a shill, so I thought, hey, shill for Christ. Actually, someone in the comments in one of the videos, I think it was a Q video, had mentioned it, so I thought, that's brilliant. I'm making this a real t-shirt. So here it is. Shill for Christ t-shirts. Take it or leave it. It is a way to support the channel, and it is a way to show how you're a shill for Christ out there when you're in the world. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you patrons for your support. Thank you everybody who shares and likes and subscribes to this channel. Go check out BitChute. I'm considering moving some stuff over to library.tv as well. It's another place that I got to go, that just more work on my end, but hopefully that can happen in the next few days or weeks here. I appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you guys soon. God bless.